Hello and welcome to the Cubs on Deck podcast. I am one of your hosts. My name is Greg Huss, and today I am joined by Myrtle Beach Pelicans broadcaster Sam Weiderhaft. Sam, you were jamming to the intro song at the beginning. I think you and Max Tomo were both absolutely jamming behind the scenes as the intro was playing.
Dude, when you hear that song, it's time to go. You're about to get educated on the Cubs system. So I am ready. And Greg, it's an honor as always to come on here.
Dude, it's been a while since I've had you on. Like we were talking before we started recording, I think it was early on in the season because we were talking about some of like the new guys that we see in the system on MILB TV that you see down in Myrtle Beach. So it was early on. Haven't had you on for a while. The team looks a whole lot different now in Myrtle Beach. It's going to probably look a little bit different in the coming weeks with some draft guys. But how are the vibes going down in Myrtle Beach right now? We'll talk about what we're going to get into for this episode, but I'm just curious about what the vibes are like down in Myrtle.
Vibes are always high. You can't really have a bad time in Myrtle Beach when you're playing baseball and just hanging out for the summer. But you're right, Greg. There's been a lot of turnover from when we last talked. We've seen promotions. And now we're kind of, looking at that month of August where we could be getting some draft picks, whatever happens at the trade deadline. That's always a super exciting time because you get new guys to talk about and see how they are able to gel in the clubhouse. But no, guys are having a good time coming off a home series against the Columbia Fireflies where they put together a few good bookend performances on Tuesday and Sunday and had some rough games there in the middle, but really ended strong with a Sunday 5-0 shutout win. So, guys are feeling good and just gearing up for what's going to be an interesting month of August and then playoffs coming up in September.
So we got 9 guys that we're talking about specifically this episode. I'm sure we'll hit on some other guys, but we have 9 guys specifically listed out that we want to cover today. And then we'll kind of end the show talking about what we let off with. There's some draft talk, some draftees that might make their way up to Myrtle Beach. So we'll probably end with that. In the middle, we'll have this long time talking about these 9 players. But before we get to the players, I've got to get a Rich Biesterfeld update. He doesn't know I'm talking about this. He doesn't know this is the plan of this episode. But our very own Rich Biesterfeld, who was on our live draft show, he's a photographer over at Northside Bound. He writes over at Northside Bound. He gives us all of our Arizona Complex League updates, which are terrific. But he made his way over to Myrtle Beach this past week. What was it like hanging out with Rich for the week?
Well, it's always great to see Rich. He's doing well. He was super excited to be in Myrtle Beach, and it's just really cool to talk about, the players with him because he just has a totally different perspective because he's seen them from when they first started out in the complex to now going to Myrtle Beach. But a great time to see Rich because we have those new signees with the draft class. So I asked him, the guys that he's seen come into the complex and all that. But no, Rich was great. Took some really, really good fireworks photos and just great photos of the game as well. And he got a few good performances on Tuesday and Sunday last week as well. So, seeing Rich is always a good time. And, I'm thankful he was able to stop by.
Always got to give a shout out to the photographers between Rich and Todd Johnson out there taking pictures and Stephanie Lynn and all kinds of people out there taking great pictures of the Cubs minor league affiliates because that really helps us over at Northside Bound. We always give them shouts whenever we possibly can, but I know it helps out you guys at Myrtle Beach when you get some photos from some players down in Arizona.
100%. I mean, whenever we get a new guy that's coming from there, I always reach out to Rich and see what photos he has. And, he's always willing to help us out in any way possible. So we're able to kind of get a look at some of these new players when they were in the complex league. So Rich is a huge help and just a great guy overall.
Hell yeah. So, all right, man, we got 9 players we're going to talk about here. We got, I think 1, 2, 3, 4 hitters and 5 pitchers. We're going to lead off with a guy that has been tabbed as a Greg Huss guy, trademark pending. And I'm doing this because before we hopped on, I sent a text to you. I go, hey, like what players, like what guys do you like want to talk about initially? Just right off the bat. I added some players. We went back and forth. You mentioned Parker Chavers, not me. Let me reiterate. It was not me mentioning Parker Chavers. Last episode talked quite a bit about Parker, and I've mentioned several other episodes, and I love getting all kinds of comments back from people in the replies on YouTube or on Twitter saying, you're talking so much about Parker Chavers, who's not even really a top 30 prospect in the system. Why do you want to talk about Parker Chavers today?
You can't not talk about him. The past couple of months he's had. He's been a Greg Huss guy ever since you threw out that Bryce Harper swing comparison. I think that he's been on your radar. But look, Parker, his turnaround from his April and May to what he's done in June and July has just been really, really fun to watch. Hit over 300 in June, and now is by that 300 mark here in July as this month comes to a close. But with him, it was always we'd see a good couple of games. We'd see him have a 3-hit game and a 2-hit game, and it was just like 2 or 3 game spurts, and then it would kind of fall off, and he'd go back into a slump, and he would chase pitches and all that. But now in these past 2 months, he's been extremely consistent. He's been one of our best hitters, and not only on the power side, but just contact as well. But he leads this team in active home runs with 9. And I talked to him a few weeks ago, right when his turnaround was really gearing up. And I just said, what's been different? And he said he's seeing the ball a lot better, and just having a better approach at the plate as opposed to just going out there and swinging. And I'm talking to our hitting coach Roberto Vaz, and he just talked about a routine standpoint. If you do something one day and that works, then keep doing it. So it's really been an all-around effort with Parker Chavers, and it's completely working. His contact is great. The power's up there as well. He's been a really fun player to watch, and one of our offensive leaders here the past 2 months.
It's got to be just like getting that consistent playing time, just feeling more comfortable, getting in a routine. Because you're right, so much of it early on was like I mentioned on last week's show. So much of it is that he would be streaky, not in terms of like month to month, a little bit, but more so just like game to game, like plate appearance to plate appearance, where he'd have one plate appearance where he just looked rough at the plate, right? He'd swing out of the zone on the first 2 pitches they at bat, and then watch one down the middle. But now he's putting some like more. It's a much better at bat together so that he can do damage on pitches in the zone, which I think is huge. And I know Brian on last week's episode mentioned the fact that he has 9 home runs this year. He has 7 doubles, which you look at Parker Chavers, like he's that doubles guy. Like you expect a lot of doubles out of Parker Chavers. But the ball is flying over the fence for him this year in a place where it's not easy to hit the ball over the fence.
Yeah, he's able to have power in Myrtle Beach. I think if 3 or 4 of his home runs are come in Myrtle, which is something that we all know is extremely hard to do. So the power is certainly there. But I think one thing we always forget with Parker when he was drafted in 21 is just the amount of injuries he's had in his career and what he's had to battle back from, not only in college, but as a professional as well. So, when he says that he's just seeing the ball a lot better, I think you're right. I think it's about just him having consistent at-bats and working back and actually having a full season of baseball to get experience, which he hasn't really had for a really long time. So with him, I think it's the reps and getting in the lineup every day and seeing more pitches, just getting more comfortable. And, he's definitely a guy that if he keeps swinging it the way he is, that I think South Bend could be calling soon.
I was going to say, I think that he's not much longer in Myrtle Beach. He's probably been due for a promotion up to South Bend for a while now because he's an older guy for the level, right? He's 24 years old. So I think that a promotion, we're recording this on Monday evening, could be come Tuesday when you guys are listening to this, that he could be up in South Bend. Because I think there's a pretty clear chain of outfielders that could be promoted, right? If you're looking at the Iowa roster, the Iowa outfield's pretty deep. So I don't know where that promotion is going to come from the Iowa outfield up to the major leagues, but you have PCA that can go from AA to AAA. You got Ezekiel Pagan that can go from South Bend and high A up to AA. You got Parker Chavers that can follow him up to South Bend. So like there's a very clear, and then you have some draft picks that can follow up Parker Chavers and end up in Myrtle Beach. So there's a very clear chain there that can be followed. And I think Parker Chavers is part of that for sure.
I think so too. I think there's definitely a way up. You mentioned Pagan. I'm so happy to see Pagan have success at high A. He's such a good dude, and coming back from an off-season injury. And I looked at his numbers the other day, and just great to see him have success with South Bend.
It's kind of exactly what he was doing last year in Myrtle, right? He is very much so like the same guy day in and day out for Ezekiel Pagan.
No, he is. Just great contact, got power as well. Really fun player to watch all the way around.
For sure. All right, man. We've gone this far without talking about the crazy performance from Mourinho Santi on Sunday, right? He ended up throwing what was technically, I guess, a no-hitter, right? Because he threw 5 no-hit innings. He recorded 8 strikeouts, I believe it was, which is a career high. And it was he threw the 5 innings, and the game ended up being cut short because of rain. So technically, Mourinho Santi, no-hitter guy.
Yeah, he is. The 6th in Pelicans history. We actually have a spot in our record book that has no-hitter 9 innings, no-hitter non-9 innings. We've had 4 9-inning no-hitters, and he's the second one to do it in a non-9 inning fashion. But
who's the guy? Do you know who the guy was, that the other non-9 inning guy?
if you give me 2 seconds, it's a two guy tandem.
Okay,
It was
yeah.
a 7 inning thing, and I have the media guide right
So
here.
Santi might have been the first guy to like go full by himself.
Yeah,
Okay, yeah.
he's the first solo no hitter in Pelicans history. The other non-9 inning no hitter was in 2012, and no, excuse me, it was in 2000,
Okay.
and it was Tim Spooneybarger Christian Para, and that was July 23rd of 2000. Wow, July 23rd of 2000. So literally 23 years to the day that happened.
That's wild.
Santi throws a That's insane.
That's wild. That's
I
crazy.
didn't even realize that.
And I also
Incredible.
we throw out some names on this podcast, man. I was not expecting what was his name? Spooneybarger? I was not expecting that. Yeah. So that's good.
That's back
You
when
can
we
use that on the
that's
next
back when we were a
broadcast.
Braves affiliate.
Yeah, exactly. All right, man. So yeah, really, he looks really, really good. Santi does this year. I mean, I think that the thing that stands out the most to me now, and I think we actually talked about Santi last time when you were on. The dude gets so many ground balls. I believe he still leads the system. 65% ground ball rate, which is outrageous. Like that's outrageously high. And that paired with the fact that he's striking out 31% of the batters he faces, that's exactly what you want from any pitcher, whether it's a starter or a reliever.
Yeah, Sunday was such an encouraging performance from Marino. And actually, yesterday morning, I went into the clubhouse and had a conversation with our pitching coach, Bruce Billings, about Santi. And he just said, he is just so close. He's so close to putting together some really good performances. The Sunday before that against the Carolina Mudcats, he went 4 no-hit innings. And then comes out last night and goes 5 no-hit innings, throws, I think, mid-70s with the pitches, but strikes out 8. He walked 3 and hit 2 batters, but was able to still get ground balls. And his curveball is so fun to watch. It's the most fun curveball I've seen probably since DJ Hers. Just so much vertical movement to it. And you're right. I think that's what causes all the ground balls. And when he's able to locate that pitch, it's deadly. And then he was throwing mid-90s with his fastball last night as well. And I talked with our catcher, Miguel Pavone, after the game, and he just said, look, Santi was on fire. Everything was working for him. It was a great day for him. So it's super, super encouraging to see that performance, and can't wait to see how he builds off that and just tries to keep the success going.
The big thing with Santi is when he was down in Arizona, whether that was in extended spring training or the Arizona Complex League, he just could not find the zone. Like he just couldn't find it. Not even from like a command perspective. He just couldn't control anything. The walk rates were outrageous, and he still got a 19% walk rate this year, which is very, very like way too high. But like I said, when you're pairing the strikeouts and the ground balls with that, it's more bearable, I guess. You know what I mean? Obviously, that's something he's still going to have to work on is kind of lowering that walk rate pretty significantly.
No, I mean, for sure. And that's going to come with, more experience as the year goes on and just figuring out how to locate. But one thing Bruce Billings has told me is that, we don't like walks, right? But walks don't beat us. Those big hits beat us. And I think Santi, for the longest time, was one of the only pitchers in the system to not give up a home run. And he's been, he is really good at limiting that damage and limiting those big hits. And that's something that's taken him pretty far away as well. And then another note that I want to throw in here that Bruce was telling me yesterday is he thinks that possibly the humidity levels in the Dominican and Myrtle might have an effect on the way Santi's throwing and the way that, it's not humid at all in Arizona. And it kind of changes the grip on the ball and changes your skin a little bit. He thought maybe that was a reason as to why the location for Marino just wasn't really there in the complex league. And now how it's coming back because we do have humid weather here, just like in the Dominican Republic. So something to think about. And I told him, I go, well, I don't think about that stuff. That's I can't believe that that's possibly a factor, but he's pitched for a long time and he's been a coach for a long time. And that's something that definitely could play a factor into it.
Yeah, honestly, that's not something I ever would have thought about, but it kind of makes sense. Back to your comment about his home runs. He's only given up 1 home run all year. He's got a 2.4% home run per fly ball ratio, which is really, really low, like almost unsustainably low. But when you're getting those ground balls, it's more normal to see something like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and the contact just hasn't been very strong off him, at least for the past few outings. I mean, it's, no hits through 9 innings now for him. So we'll see how he just builds off that start and continues his first full year of affiliated baseball.
So from a guy in Mourinho Santi who is doing his best to kind of enter that top 30 discussion in the system, he's not quite there yet. He's trying to get in the mix. To a guy in Jackson Ferris who is doing his best to get in that top 5 in the system mix, right? He's very clearly a top 10 guy in the system. He has been absolutely terrific this year. Brian on last episode mentioned him as a guy that might even break out further in the second half as he maybe starts to kind of tack on more innings into his starts. This year, he's put up a 31 innings. He's put up a 3.19 ERA. He has a 31% strikeout rate, and he's rocking a 12% walk rate. I mean, across the board, like those kind of basic stats, that's as good as you can possibly find from a 19-year-old in full season ball.
When you guys said on the podcast last week that 2024 is going to be a big year for Ferris, I think I audibly said yes. Like that is, it's once he gets those pitch limits up and is able to throw a little bit more freely with longer innings, I think you're really going to see him break out and just see an incredible job on the mound from him. But this year, he's done all that he's been asked of. He had a start last week against Columbia that I thought was really interesting. So he comes out in the first inning and throws nothing but fastball every single pitch, and then comes out in the second inning and it's all breaking balls. And I'm like, what's going on here? And there was an at-bat, his first strikeout of the game, where he goes, he's facing a righty. He goes curveball right in the zone, curveball down and in, gets a really ugly swing out of it, and then fastball right, I think lower inside part of the plate, and just gets the guy free. He's frozen. And that was, I think, my favorite sequence I've seen Ferris have this year. Just the way that he's, he comes out, he's going to blow your fastball by you in the first inning and then mix it up in the second inning a little bit. And just rely on his stuff, which is incredibly good. The curveball is really fun to watch. His slider is making more improvements as the year goes on, and that fastball mid to upper 90s. I mean, man, it's unhittable. So, Jackson's going longer now. He went 3 2/3, I believe, last week it was. So we're seeing longer starts out of him. He's managing his starts a little bit better as well. So I know a big thing with our pitching department here is, trying to effectively and efficiently pitch, where you're keeping your pitch limit down and you're able to go longer in games, and not make those at bats as long. And I think Jackson's trying to learn that so he can go longer in games. But just a really, really fun start to watch every single time he's on the mound, and is certainly living up to his top 10 Cubs prospect status right now.
I mean, it's one of those things where it's really easy to bet on a guy who has 2+ pitches. That fastball is a plus pitch, the slider's a plus pitch, plus he has the curveball. It's good. But you're betting on those two offerings, like with Ben Brown, right? Ben Brown up in AAA, he's got a really strong fastball. He's got a really strong breaking ball, if you want to call this a slider, a curveball, and he manipulates it in whatever way. But like two really strong pitches. Cade Horton, really strong fastball, really strong slider, and then he starts incorporating that curveball and that changeup. Cade Horton does. With Jackson Ferris, you're looking at the same thing. He's 19 years old. If he can live off that fastball and slider right now, like that's awesome. But he's showing the ability to throw that curveball. He'll start to develop that changeup a little bit more as he climbs the ladder. It's like that's a really, all things considered, for a high school pitcher, it's a safer profile to kind of bet on.
Yeah, once he starts building that arsenal more and more, I think you're just going to see him get more and more effective as his career goes on. But learning the basics right now of what it means to be a professional, getting the routine down this year, and then next year, wherever he starts off at, I think it's just going to be a huge year for him. And you hear me talk about this a lot with the guys, but I think mentality is such a big part of it. And we had our big feature come out on him a few weeks ago, just kind of telling his story. And he's kind of a goofy guy around the clubhouse. He usually keeps things light, but once he gets on the mound, he just taps into a different competitive zone, and he's able to get out there and just mow guys down. So he is a great guy to watch, and certainly, I mean, it's been a great first year for him.
I'm typically like super conservative on timelines, and I try not to use them at all because it's development is so strange, and especially from guys climbing 4 different steps in the minor league ladder in full season ball. Like I try not to use those as much as possible, and I'm not using one here. However, I'm saying that to point out the fact that I'm typically really conservative. I'm saying one level per year, and then you can kind of alter to and from that. You know what I mean? Jackson Ferris, I'm willing to be a little bit more aggressive on like my timeline thinking. Just even though he is a high school arm, which is typically even more conservative, I just think that as long as he can kind of prove next year, it's probably not going to come this year, but prove next year that he can be a guy that kind of eats up some more innings, 5, 6 innings as opposed to 3, 4 innings. I don't see why he can't kind of start next year in South Bend, move his way up the upper levels of the minors, up to Double A maybe at the end of next year, up in Double A and Triple A in 2025, and be up in Chicago by end of 2025, early 2026. That's a fast timeline for a guy who's a teenager right now. You know what I mean?
Extremely fast, but I think it shows you a lot when the Cubs just full on make him skip the complex league right after spring training and just go straight to Myrtle Beach, which
Yep.
For a high school arm is it really says something. I mean, that says a lot about when he came out in spring training and what the Cubs saw coming off the offseason. I think they had enough confidence to send him right to full season baseball, and he has proved that his talent, he definitely belongs here right now in his stage of his development process. So yeah, I mean, I think that trajectory is definitely possible for Jackson, who, again, I keep reminding myself, is only 19 right now.
Wild.
Yeah.
So he's 19. He was a high school draft pick. Another guy who was a high school draft pick a year ago is Luis Ruhano, who's only 20 years old. He's a little bit older at 20 years old. He's looked pretty solid. I was really excited to see Ruhano make his debut this year because we saw all those fun clips of him showcasing his slider that he was posting all over his Instagram page while he was working down in Arizona. But he's kind of proven to be more than just that slider during his time in Myrtle Beach. He's been really impressive. I mean, as impressive as Ferris has been over his 31 innings, Luis Rujano over 30 innings has an even better ERA, at a 3 flat ERA, striking out 26%, walking 16%. He's a big bodied guy. He got moved into the rotation pretty recently, right? He initially was working as a reliever. He got called up at the same time as Dom Hamley was up to Myrtle Beach. Hamley's back in the ACL. Ruhano's up to the rotation in Myrtle Beach. He's looked strong, I've thought.
Yeah, and I think it was exciting when he did get moved to the rotation. We had the 2 promotions of Michael Arias and Brody McCullough both get moved up to South Bend, and Ruhano took one of those spots. But he is a big body guy. He's a big dude, and again with him, I mentioned it with Jackson, but and Mourinho Santi, but I think the process with Ruhano right now is learning how to be more effective. So he goes out last week and gets 3 zeros, 3 shutout innings, but he walks 4 and strikes out 3. So Bruce Billings basically told me, look, he got the results, but now it's about, all right, how can we sequence better? How can we locate better and make those 3 zeros 4 zeros and kind of build off that? But Bruce had super high praise for Ruhano. Just says he has a great work ethic, works really hard at his craft. And if they have something for him to do or something for him to learn, he's always willing to learn it. So yeah, a lot of life on his fastball, not just a slider guy, and has been able to locate fairly well for his first year in full season baseball. So he started only 3 games. He started off in the bullpen and then got moved up to the rotation, but we'll see what else is left in store for the big righty.
Yeah, I think that he's commanding the ball as much as you'd expect a 20-year-old in full season ball to be commanding. I'm not trying to be greedy with him, I don't think. I think that when you're looking at the way he pitches, he can lean on that slider and get swings and misses for sure. Both on pitches in the zone and out of the zone. The fastball, it kind of has some leaky command, but like you see the life in the fastball, like in terms of velo, but also in terms of that a little bit of that cut ride that the Cubs development staff loves to kind of incorporate into pitchers. That Justin Steele is the prime example of that. Obviously, we talk about it a lot on the show, but you see a little bit of that on the fastball. I don't have the data and the metrics to back it up, but you see some of that. If you can command that, then that's also going to get some not only swings and misses, but some real good like weak contact too, which is like important. If you're getting the swings and misses with the slider, you're getting the weak contact with the fastball. It's kind of that's what you're looking for,
Yeah, then you're set. I mean, it's
pitching's
exactly.
easy, right?
It is. No, but he's got a full arsenal. Like, he's got a lot of pitches he can choose from, which is something that is a rarity at this level,
Yeah.
especially at 20 years old when you know so many pitches and you have a lot to choose from. You're always keeping hitters guessing. I know that's an obvious statement, but now how can we refine all those pitches he has and work on those so he can move up in his developmental path?
I think he profiles as a rotation piece moving forward, just based off. You look at Luis Ruhano, and he looks like a starting pitcher.
Yeah.
He's on the short list for the Pelicans all get off the bus team in terms of the size and looking intimidating to his opponents.
100%. If he came out following Grant Kipp, and then when we still had Felix Stevens, that would we'd start off on a good foot there. I think we'd get some intimidation to the other team.
I love it. All right, let's move on to another guy this was a 2020 draft pick. Colin Moreno has turned it on. He started last year. He was really, really rough in Myrtle Beach. Like, you can't really sugarcoat what he did in Myrtle Beach a year ago. He's always been a really, really good athlete. I think he was a sprinter. He was a runner in high school. Played or ran track.
Yeah,
And
basketball too. I think too. I think he was a pretty good
basketball too. He posted a video of him dunking. I think, like, always a really good athlete.
Yeah.
But it just didn't translate well to the mound last year. All the moving parts just were not synced up very well. And then he came out this year back in Myrtle Beach, and it didn't look nearly as bad as last year, but he got off to kind of a rough start. And then he kind of just really turned it on. He's been working as a piggybacker for the entire year, basically. Up to this point in the season. Actually, let's take a look at his last 9 games, because his last 9 have been really, really strong. 24 innings pitched. He's got a 2.63 ERA, which is really good. Opponents are hitting just 183 off of Koen. That's an OPS of 607. So the last 9, he's really turned it on. I think he's looked really impressive, especially after a rough start to his pro career.
Yeah, I mean, he is watching him just change this season and improve has been one of the most fun things. Just because, like you said, Greg, when he first came to Myrtle last year, there was really nowhere to go but up, and then he comes out again this year and struggles, and then it's like, okay, where do we go from here? And just talking with him and talking with Bruce, just the mental toughness on this guy is incredible, because he gets knocked down early in the year. Is really struggling through his outings, but he sticks with it and he takes it all in stride. And now, he's grown so much mentally. He's grown physically. His changeup is looking better and better. I mean, that's an elite pitch right there.
It is.
And he's able to get results. And he hasn't had a big blow up like he was in the beginning of the year. So, he's been a great player to watch develop. And that's what this league and, this lower part of minor league baseball it's all about, right? It's all about learning and getting more experience. And that's exactly what Cohen's been able to do. He's very coachable from what I've heard, and just a really good kid. So I mean, it's super, super exciting to be able to watch him and see him have back-to-back months with sub-3 ERAs. And you mentioned the whole piggyback thing. Like, he started off as a starter early in the year, moved to the bullpen, but really, he just treats those games like starts anyways. I mean, he's out in right field doing the long toss. And, he told me the mentality really hasn't changed with him. It's still basically a start, because he's still throwing relatively starting innings, typically going 3-4 frames in his outings. But, yeah, the improvement has been awesome. And just can't wait to see how he finishes this year and what's been a huge step forward.
Yeah, I can't imagine his mentality coming into this year, because, I mean, talking from the perspective of someone who's evaluating these prospects, I came out and, like, I saw his first few outings this year, and I was like, oh, like, honestly, my mindset was like, oh, here we go again, because last year was so rough, and I wanted to kind of chalk up last year coming into this season. I wanted to chalk up last year as just a big major, like, just a learning experience. Like, he went through those rough patches, but hopefully he worked really hard in the off season. And then when he came out and made like 3 straight rough outings to begin the year, if I remember right. And when he made those, I was like I don't want to give up on him, obviously, but it's like I'm seeing the same thing I saw last year. But so I can't imagine like that mindset from him after those first few outings, and then to return and do what he's doing now. Like I mentioned, these last 9 outings have been tremendous. And from my perspective, I'm like that means even more to me that he was able to bounce back from those year and a few extra outings, that rough stretch, and be what he is now. Like that just means more in my mindset, you know?
Yeah, when you go out there and you just don't have it, which is what his beginning of the year was. He just didn't have it. He was all over the zone, hitting guys, walking guys, just all over the place, and then is able to dial in, get that walk rate down, and then I forgot to mention last week in his outing, hit 96. So the
Yeah.
fastball is getting more velocity as the year goes on, and his arm just keeps heating up, and he's locating, and it's just really seems to be really dialed in and in a really good place right now, where he's just getting more and more comfortable. And it's really good to see.
Yeah, I think I have him here as a 15% walk rate, I believe is what, or 19% walk rate, which is either one of those. It's way it's way lower than I expected him to be
Yeah.
at, which is fun. It's still really high, but like that'll come down for sure.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So Koen was a high school draft pick, a lot of development to go, to a guy in Grant Kipp who never really considered, he's still now not a top prospect. He's a college guy, just a completely different pitcher is Grant Kipp than really any of these guys we've talked about up to this point.
He is, and it's been relatively a surprise, right, to see the success he's had because undrafted free agent out of Yale last year. You don't really know what you're getting. Pitched in the Cape League for a few games, and then came out and just struggled a little bit in his first professional experience. But last year was a wild year for him. He said it was the craziest summer of his life. And then comes to Myrtle Beach and just really has been dialed in, focused, consistent. I think that's the main thing. So before our rotation got a little jacked up after the All-Star break, he was always that Tuesday starter. And to have a consistent start where Kipp's going at least 5 innings almost every time, not giving up too many runs, not giving up too many hits. He's had big strikeout games as well. That really means a lot for your team. And it also saves your bullpen going in for the rest of the week as well. And that's what Grant would do. I think the best thing about Grant, his personality is awesome. He is a really fun dude in the clubhouse. Really good Mario Kart player. I've played him multiple times, and he's smoked me. So that's you add the Yale education, you add what he's done on the mound this year, and he's also a top tier Mario Kart player.
Triple threat,
all around dude.
Yeah.
All around dude. The vibes are there, but
that's incredible.
No, the one big thing he stresses is he really tries to dumb things down on the mound. He doesn't want to go in there thinking too much. He doesn't want to think about his spin rate. He doesn't want to think about his velocity. He just wants to go out there and throw, and that's what he does. And
that's so funny to me. You're looking at a guy who was undrafted free agent out of Yale.
Yeah.
And he's big on like you're just like naturally you're thinking, oh, like he's really into the spin rates. Like that's he's diving into that really hard, or his mechanics or whatever. And no, like he's the opposite, where he's wanting to make sure that he dumbs it down, and pitching is pitching.
He does care about it. I mean, he'll read books about he's read books about baseball development and and analytics and stuff like that. But when he goes out there and he's actually in the start, he just wants to get results.
Yes.
And that's exactly what Grant's been doing. When he has struggled, he told me that he's just kind of forgotten who he was as a pitcher and who he is as a guy that relies on his breaking ball and then also has the fastball to kind of get hitters off a little bit. But he throws a sweeper, throws a really good curveball, low 90s fastball, but has been missing bats this year. And just a great guy to have at the top of the rotation, and a really good clubhouse guy too.
Yeah, when we've had whether it's this version of the podcast or past version, when we had Max Bain on the show, and we would talk to him about the difference in getting into the nitty gritty of how to pitch better in terms of mechanics and spin rates and all that stuff, and being able to kind of have all that and get better and have that ingrained into you, so that when you go on the mound in a game, you don't have to think about it. Like you're just out there competing, and you're being a competitor in its truest form, and you're not thinking about, is my body doing what it's supposed to do to succeed? I'm just doing it. You know what I mean? So like I'm glad that like a guy like Grant Kipp can think from that mindset, because I think that's important for all pitchers.
It is, and it's a kind of a mindset that I feel like has gotten lost as as we start getting more data and we start getting more numbers, and I think it's really special that he can go out there and just forget everything and rely on his instincts and throw really well. He had a start a few weeks ago where I think he went 5 perfect innings. And this just kind of shows you his personality. But I noticed after every strikeout he got, he's holding the follow through. I mean, he throws and holds the follow through and then kind of walks around the mound. And I'm like, that's new. I haven't seen that from him. And then he comes off the mound after I think it was his 5th or 6th inning. I can't remember how long it was, but it was a long start. And he comes off the mound and he does the ice in my veins. And I'm like, okay, this is new. Something's going on here. And so I asked him the next day, I'm like, hey, Grant, we noticed a little bit more flair from you last night. Where was that? And he said that Brody McCullough, who has a really good K-strut, he said Brody was getting on him, like, you got to get more swaggy out there on the mound. And so he decided that the follow-through was going to be his thing. And then he ends with the ice in his veins. And you can see him just smirking back at guys in the dugout when he's doing it. I mean, he is just such a funny guy.
That's incredible. Brody McCullough is a guy that he knows how to work a mound. So I'm glad that he was giving some pointers to Grant. That's for sure. You mentioned like that consistency. And I feel like looking at Grant Kipp is like what he's doing. And now granted, this is in single A. This is not the major league level, but like this is the ideal performance that you want from like a major league like 3 or 4 starter, where he's out there and he's eating innings. He's never has a blow up outing, which is super important for a bullpen. Even if you're giving up a few runs over the course of 5 innings, like you'll take that because you're not really torturing the bullpen by only going 2 innings and 6 runs. You know what I mean? And now he's still got a long ways to go. He's in single A right now. But like that's exactly what you want to see from a bulldog mentality type pitcher.
Exactly, bulldog, like the Yale Bulldogs. But
nice.
Thank you. He is able to stay mentally tough on the mound. He goes out there last week and gives up a 2-run home run in the first inning, gives up another run in the second, but he finishes off retiring the final 7 batters, retired the 3rd and 4th innings in order, and was able to put a good cap on his start. So he's never had a blow up start. He's been a big innings eater and just consistent all the way through.
So here's what I've got on Kipp. To start off the year in his first 5 starts, he gave up 1 run, 3 runs, 2 runs, 3 runs, 3 runs. His most recent 3 starts, he gave up 2 runs, 3 runs, 3 runs. But everything in between that, which was basically the entire months of May and June, he had a 1.19 ERA. Opponents were hitting 183 off of him, 318 slug, 248 OBP. Like, if you can have those like decent starts where he's given up 2 runs over 5 innings consistently, and then every once in a while you can break off a month where you're having a 1.1 ERA, you'll take that every day of the week. Like, you'd rather have that with the better chance that you have some really strong starts than that with a blow up here and there. You know what I mean? That's super valuable.
100%. It's something I love seeing too, is just results. I mean, Tyler Santana with us last year was a guy that would eat a ton of innings and get results. And that's something that Grant does. And I think it's, maybe as the years go on, maybe it's a little underappreciated at this point. If somebody can just go out there and, and not really, I don't know too much of the metrics, but just go out there and strike guys out and get weak contact and just work through starts. I think it's something that's almost been kind of a lost art, but especially at the single A level when you're focused on so many other things with development. But I think it's something that really says a lot about a guy.
Yep, absolutely. All right, man. You want to transition into some? I know we covered Chavers at the top, but you want to transition into some hitters here?
Let's step up to the plate, Greg.
All right, let's talk Jefferson Rojas, because he's honestly been one of the more notable names in the system this year. Not necessarily the top prospect, but just the fact that he's come out of nowhere. He burst onto the scene. He had rave reviews from his work down in Arizona. He makes an appearance, or he comes up to Myrtle Beach. He's really, really strong. He's cooled off a bit recently. Actually, I have the numbers for him pulled up here. It's been kind of night and day. The first 16 games versus the most recent 18 games. So the first 16, he had a 328 batting average, 394 OBP, and a slugging of 466. And then the second half of his season so far, the last 18, he's been a 215 hitter with a 288 OBP and a 308 slug. So really 2 completely different hitters. for the first half, the second half of, I guess, the first half of the season. Which is more Jefferson between those two versions of himself?
The first part. I
Yeah.
think, look, he's, I say it on the broadcast all the time. The dude is 18, but not only is he 18, he just turned 18 like before opening day. Like it was an April birthday. So his youth and being at the single A level, he plays one game in the ACL and goes right up to Myrtle Beach, which means a lot.
Yeah.
But what you said, Greg, he burst on the scene. That is exactly what happened because I had heard just guys I heard talking. Hey, there's a guy down in Arizona. There's a shortstop down in Arizona that he's going to get to Myrtle at some point, and this is going to be fun. And then he gets the call up and just has a great first month of June. But now, kind of working through, it's his first season of full season baseball. I know he wasn't with us for the first 2 months, but maybe getting used to his routine as the year goes on and figuring things out, playing a ton of games. And just kind of working through this first year in affiliated baseball. But goes out, hits a grand slam, has a 5 RBI night on Tuesday night, and then he ended the series with back-to-back multi-hit games. And the one thing I keep hearing about Jefferson is it's 2 words: poise and maturity. And that's exactly when I see him at batting practice. I talk to him a little bit, and he never gets too high, never gets too low. And one of the big things I've heard is he's got that short baseball memory where if he goes out, has a bad at bat, or he makes a bad play in the field, he forgets it, focuses on the next play, and is just really, really dialed in mentally for an 18-year-old kid. I think that really says a lot. And then speaking to his defense, he had a great defensive series this past week against the Columbia Fireflies, made some awesome plays at short. And I told myself, I said, this might be the best defensive shortstop I've seen since I saw Ed Howard my first year, because those two defensively are just awesome. And Jefferson he's got a very, very bright future in front of him.
Dude, him playing shortstop has been interesting to see because I think that a lot of people have gone to just assuming that because Christian Hernandez has kind of struggled at the plate this year, that, like the Cubs don't believe in him. Let's move him to second base. And here comes Jefferson Rojas. I think it's more the fact that Jefferson Rojas looks really strong at shortstop. Like he's got the actions. He's not making every single play out there, but he looks pretty damn good at shortstop. I don't think it's an indictment on Christian at all. I think it's more of a, hey, look at this guy in Jefferson Rojas. Look how good he is.
100%. And just seeing what he was able to do in the field. I mean, he's got a great first step. He really just covers a lot of ground. He's got an awesome arm and just is really toolsy. I mean, he's got a lot of different features about his game that really, that really show out when he takes the field. So really, really mature guy. I mean, just 18 years old and is able to work long at bats and has a great approach at the plate. Hearing a lot of great things about him, seeing a lot of great things about him. He's going to be on the map for a while, and I think it's awesome. I know prospect rankings are kind of all over the place, but when he is not in the top 30 and then jumps all the way up to number 15 in the middle of the year is just super
wild.
cool.
Yeah, it's wild. I'll point out one more thing in that good versus bad splits that I was kind of pointing out earlier. Earlier in the season, he had a 17% strikeout rate. This rough stretch, he's at an 18% strikeout rate. So it's not like he's swinging and missing a whole lot more. It's not like he's being sat down on strikes. I'd love to say I don't have his batting average and balls in play for those different stretches pulled up, but I'm guessing that he's making a lot weaker contact recently, and that's what's leading to a lower slash line. But that's just a matter of you go through those stretches. It's a small enough threshold of games there at what I say 18 games. That's a small enough sample size that you can chalk that up to some kind of quirkiness a little bit. I think that ultimately you look at this stretch of him making his full season debut and look at the entire slash line, which is still really, really good. And that's closer to what like Jefferson Rojas is. He's not going to be a guy slashing 330, like having a 330 batting average in single A as an 18-year-old. That's ridiculous to assume. Like that's just not going to happen. It's the happy medium there, which I think is perfectly fine in itself.
100%. And I think another thing at this level, which always kind of trips me up, but I've heard it so many times is, okay, look, we know that you're disciplined. We know that you're not going to swing at balls out of the zone. Now let's pick which pitches we want to drive in the zone. And that could be something that's going on with Jefferson now that he's possibly getting weaker contact. Okay, now let's choose some better pitches to go gap to gap on.
That's so valuable to be able to do that as an 18-year-old in full season ball, because some guys don't get to experience that, where you come up, you adjust, you identify pitches that you can drive until they're 22 years old in single A, and he's
Yeah.
doing it at 18 years old. So like that's so valuable.
Yeah, it speaks to the raw talent. I think it speaks to his coachability and the way that he's able to listen, take suggestions, and then put it out on the field.
Yeah. All right, man. Last episode, Brian and I, at the tail end, we talked about Reivaj Garcia and Rafael Morel, because I don't think it was, we didn't intend on talking about those guys that episode, but it's one of those things where both of these guys have been so strong this year, and almost to the point where they're surprisingly strong. I pointed out last week that both guys they're only 21 years old. I think both of them are getting ready to turn 22 years soon, but they're both only 21 years old. But it's felt like each of them have been around for a long time in the Cubs system. But both, I mean, at this point, they might be the two most consistent hitters on the Pelicans roster.
Oh, 100%. And I'll talk about Reivaj first, but you mentioned it in the last podcast episode. It just feels like he's been around forever. And, he broke that ACL Cubs team back in 2018 at just 16 years old. I mean, he was a super young guy playing for that team, and he's been around ever since then. And we've seen him at the Pelicans for 3 years now. So he came in 2021, played a few games. He came in 2022 and played a few games. And in fact, back in 21, he went all the way and played, I think, 17 games in Double A Tennessee.
Yeah, he was kind of roving quite a bit. Did he log like a AAA inning too, or no? Because I know he was up and like kind of all over the system that year.
He did not. He played 17 games in Tennessee, batted 146. But yeah, I mean, he was going up and down. He's got experience.
You know who did that though was Luis Vasquez a few years ago, where he was all up and down the system. He didn't belong, like when he was 20 years old, and he likely belonged in Myrtle Beach or South Bend. He was playing some games up in Iowa, and like that, it's just the amount of confidence that a front office has to be able to say, hey, like just we need to fill a spot, to fill a roster spot up in Double A, like Reivaj did. That's valuable in itself, that the front office has the confidence to do that. Now he's back to his like traditional normal development path down in Myrtle Beach.
Yeah, it says a lot when they're able to trust somebody to do that. But Reivaj now getting consistent playing time in Myrtle Beach. He's had such an interesting season and really took off last month in June. And I asked our manager Buddy Bailey and I asked our hitting coach Roberto Vaz about what led to the success. And they, through these drills and what they've done with him at the plate, they've added 10 miles per hour off on his exit velos, and he's hitting the ball so much harder. He goes to Augusta, comes out of nowhere and hits 2 home runs. I mean, we haven't seen any power from Reivaj leading up to that, and then goes and has two home runs in that series. So he strikes the ball well. He's a switch hitter, and he hits almost identical. I think he's 296 against lefties, 292 against righties. That might be flipped, but he's very consistent from both sides. And he goes out and faces a lefty on Saturday against Columbia. So he's batting from the right side, and he hits 3 balls to right field. He goes on the left side facing a righty on Sunday, I think 2 balls to left field. So he sprays the ball all over the place. You don't really know where it's going. And then in the field, he came up as a middle infielder. Now he's playing second base, third base, but now he's getting a ton of playing time at first. Because we had, when we had Felix Stevens and Moises Ballesteros both go up to high A, we lost a lot of our first base production. Miguel Pabon played over there. He's still playing over there, but somebody had to come in and fill the gap. And Reivaj Garcia has been that guy, and he is learning first base very quickly, despite, no matter what Ron Washington says in Moneyball, that it's incredibly hard to learn first base. Reivaj has been doing a great job over there. He's picking balls, and he's really played very well defensively. So he's a valuable part of this Pelicans lineup. And it's clear that they're trying to find him more and more at bats by moving him over to first base.
Yeah, that's just like everything you described there, just full on team guy. All right. Like that's he does everything for the team. The numbers are, I mean, he's pushing up towards a 300 batting average at this point in the season, which is incredible. Like you mentioned, according to, I have him bashing 113 according to my stats, which is really, really impressive. It helps that he's playing in Myrtle Beach. He gets a little tick up there. But like, if you're putting up even a 391 slug, which is what he has in Myrtle Beach, that's not common. That's good, you know. So just all around good slash line. He's a team guy. He's playing all over the infield. That's awesome. I love what we're seeing from Reivaj. And then Rafael Morel is another example of a guy that had just been kind of in the system for a while. He's looking really, really good. Again, really good, really good numbers this year overall. 116 bash. He's striking out 23%, walking 14%. He's got a 383 OBP, which is the thing that stands out the most to me with Rafael Morel.
Yeah, very disciplined hitter, and
Yeah.
just the definition of consistency. Because he's been batting around that 280 mark basically the whole year. Puts really good contact on, is able to get on base, and again, a big team guy, big in the clubhouse. The guys love him, and is just willing to work. I mean, I see Rafael Morel out there all the time, just working on different things and improving his swing. We've seen him have pop. He's got 4 home runs this year, and now it's just continuing to work on that and get better. But when you can bat around 280 at the single A level in your first experience of affiliated baseball, I think that says a lot. And Rafi is a guy that also plays everywhere. He's transitioned to an outfielder, but
Yeah.
we've seen him in the infield. Has now moved back to a corner outfield spot, but he's willing to play anywhere. He's willing to learn. Buddy is able to find him at bats because this lineup needs him. And when we lost Moises and Felix to high A, those were your 2 big home run hitters. And that was a ton of power production. And now since we lost them, I mean, our power numbers really haven't dipped off all that much. Including, I think they've almost gone up because different guys like Reivaj and Morel and Pedro Ramirez and guys that didn't really have power before are now starting to step up and really take big steps. And I think Rafi's been extremely consistent and just a big part of this lineup.
Yeah, Morel years ago was predominantly like a shortstop, second base, a little bit of third base. And then he was down in Arizona, I think, for the past couple of years, working a lot as a first baseman for quite a few innings over there. You're right. Now we're seeing him predominantly as an outfielder. That's something that his brother does, right? Christopher Morel is a utility guy in every sense of the word. Rafael Morel is absolutely that too. I'll ask what I'm sure everybody's thinking about as they're watching Christopher Morel up at the major league level. What is something that you see in Rafael that is the most similar and the most different from Christopher Morel?
Oh gosh. Well, I wish I saw Christopher in Myrtle Beach, but he never played with the Pelicans. He went during that switch. He just stayed with South Bend. But the similarities, I mean, the personality is extremely similar. They're always smiling, and I think that's a thing that fans have really latched onto. But Rafael looks, he's younger than Christopher is by 3 years, but the looks are definitely there, the size is there, and the personality is definitely there. He's always in a good mood and always willing to work, and just and enjoy his time at the ballpark. Differences, I don't know. I mean, Morel, I want to correct myself. He was, I said corner outfielder, but he's played center field a lot too. So right in center field.
Yeah.
But they are similar players. And, just being able to be that utility guy that can be used anywhere is extremely valuable. And wherever you can find at bats, I mean, that's the name of the game. And that's something that Rafi does. That's something that Christopher does. And it's, they're both very, very valuable to the club.
The one thing I'll point out, like pretty obviously in my eyes, is that Rafael is not nearly as explosive as Christopher Morel, and that's not a knock necessarily on Rafael.
Not yet.
Yeah, exactly. And watching Christopher as he came up and still now, like, that is the one thing you notice right out the gate, right? Is that explosive athleticism in Christopher. Rafael doesn't have that yet, but Rafael's pretty smooth. I'd say that he might be a little smoother than Christopher. I think that Christopher's out there and he's when he's playing third base, he's chucking it across the diamond. And it's not really all one like fluid motion, although he's looking better at second base in the bigs. But Rafael's pretty smooth wherever he's playing. He looks natural at every position that he's playing, instead of just like he's a freak athlete that can play all these positions.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. He commands the field very well, and we have seen speed from him. He's stolen 13 bases, but he's also been caught 7 times. So, maybe the speed isn't as there as Christopher is, but he still shows it. But yeah, it just does a ton of different little things really well, and I think that's led to a successful season for him.
All right, brother. Any other players before we get into some draft picks?
No, I think we covered a lot of them.
All right.
No, that was a great discussion.
So I've got to ask, as we're sitting here recording this now, no 2023 draft picks have been assigned to any full season affiliate. They're all down in Arizona. If I guess you saw who the Cubs drafted. I'm hoping we get to see Matt Shaw in Myrtle Beach here soon. Who are some guys, just a couple guys, you don't have to go into detail, that you're like most excited to see make their way up to full season ball?
Well, you and I both. I mean, we've heard so many good things about Matt Shaw, and that's something that when Rich was here, kind of touched on. He said that he's been at the complex, taking some hacks, just getting into the system. I think that's really exciting. But we'll see what the plan is with him. I've heard a lot of good things about Josh Rivera from Florida. Going back and look at his highlight tapes and seeing him in the College World Series, just looks like an incredible athlete that if we would be able to get him, I think is definitely somebody that's going to pop out at you. Will Sanders from South Carolina as well. I know the pitchers are a little bit weird as far as their assignments, but he would be a fun name. But really, I mean, this is just such an exciting time to get guys because you get to tell more stories and you get to introduce them to the Cubs fans for the first time, and you get to see them, work in the organization for the first time. And, last year when we got the draft picks, I think they kind of rejuvenated this team and gave it kind of a fresh look going into September. And that's why, August is a fun month because you get a lot of exciting new names and new storylines to talk about. So was really interesting following the draft and seeing what the Cubs ended up doing. But I think there's a lot of, with them going pretty relatively position player heavy, I think that adds a whole new list of possibilities as to what they do with them at the back end of this year. So we'll see. I'm excited. It's going to be a fun couple of weeks.
Yeah, I think you guys are in a unique position, right? Especially with this year's draft where it was so heavy on college bats, because those guys are way more likely to make it to a full season affiliate in their draft year. Like pitchers are far less likely. High school guys are that they almost never ever happen.
Yeah.
So you're banking on the college bats, which they have this year. So you might see some of those guys this year, but you might get them for a couple dozen games because next year because they're more advanced college hitters, they might start off the year up in South Bend and you might not see them again. So you're in a unique position that like you get those guys this year, so you get the first look at them. But then all that knowledge that you gain of them, then they're gone by the time next year rolls around.
I know. Well, we saw it in 21. When 21 we got Christian Franklin and we got Casey Opitz, and that might have been it for the draft picks on the position player side. We ended up getting Christian back this year after his injury, but Casey, we had him behind the plate for a few weeks and then gets bumped up. Actually, last year when we got Hayden McGeary for the last, I don't even know if he was here for a full month.
I think it was a couple of weeks. Yeah,
it was a couple of weeks, and he starts off next year, this year in South Bend and is having the year that he's been having, which has been really fun to follow.
Well, it's like, I mean, that home, you remember that home run Hayden hit last year after he got drafted. And it was an absolute tank at Pelicans ballpark. So I think it went over the bleachers out there in left field. And it's like, you could just say like we saw it first. We saw that happen first. We saw this breakout coming this year with Hayden McGeary. And it's like we might see that again with, like you said, Josh Rivera or Matt Shaw or any of this. Mike Carrico's another guy that has some big time power that might get to show it off.
Exactly. This is it's usually their first stop, and it's just super fun being able to see them for the first time and just getting fans excited. I think is the big part. Like you said, the Hayden McGeary home run, whether it's that or it's something else. It's always exciting going on Twitter or X now. Sorry, and just seeing the reaction from the Cubs fans and seeing how excited everybody gets.
All right, brother. Speaking of X, speaking of Twitter, whatever we're gonna call it, you want to go ahead and plug yourself and all that good stuff?
Yeah, for sure. Twitter at Sam_Weiderhaft, Instagram Weiderhaft, and the Pelicans on Twitter or X is at Pelican Baseball. Instagram is at Pelicans Baseball. We got a ton of fun stuff coming out. I mentioned our next feature should be coming out soon on Miguel Pabon, which is going to be really exciting. We have a ton of really cool things lined up for the rest of the year, and then playoffs coming up once again in September. So going to be a really fun end of 2023 to follow. And Greg, man, as always, I love coming on the show.
I appreciate it, Sam. I appreciate it. So you guys out there listening can find me at Out of the Vines on Twitter. You can find the podcast on, if you're watching on YouTube, you can see the handles there. But if you're listening on Instagram, Cubs on Deck on Instagram, the Northside Bound YouTube feed, at Inside Bound on Twitter, any podcast platform where you listen to podcasts. I think that I technically have a Twitter account for Cubs on Deck. I don't really use it, but it's there. But if you guys are looking to transfer out of the Twitter world, I don't know if this is actually the beginning of the end of Twitter, but I do have a threads for Cubs on Deck. I haven't posted anything there, but just in case, I know that Greg Zumak set up a really nice Discord server over there for Cubs Prospect Talk. You can find, I'll go and retweet that or tweet that out so you guys can find the link if you guys want to talk prospects in the Discord server, because that's always fun. I know that Zumak's over there, I'm over there, Brian Smith's over there. So the host of this show, I know that Full Count Tommy is over there as well. So there's all kinds of good conversations going on over there. You can check that out. But in the meantime, that's all I've got for you. You can find us on all the podcast platforms. I appreciate you guys listening, and we'll be back in your ears in one short week. Thanks, guys.